Today, visitors move quietly through rooms that were once engineered to overwhelm them. The marble still holds its chill. The ceilings still hover at impossible heights. Gold leaf continues to catch the light as if nothing has changed. Yet the building is no longer what it was designed to be. The great fireplaces do not burn. The household staff no longer move in disciplined choreography below stairs. The house no longer commands an economy, it hosts one. The Breakers survives as spectacle, but it was conceived as proof. Proof that American wealth, new, aggressive, and unapologetic, could rival the hereditary permanence of Europe. Proof that industry, still raw and loud in its factories, could transform itself into marble, silk, and symmetry. Proof that power could be assembled, not inherited. It stands now as a preserved artifact of a question that once unsettled an entire social order. How did a nation without ancient quarries of privilege, without guilds, without centuries of architectural lineage, construct something so absolute? Before cranes, before diesel engines, before mechanized logistics became routine, this palace rose from a windswept Atlantic cliff. Its walls are not simply masonry, they are compressed ambition. And the real story is not how it looks, it is how it was made. Chapter 1: The House as Museum. In the present day, the Breakers operates on a schedule. Visitors enter in measured intervals, tickets are scanned, audio guides are distributed. The great doors, once opened according to household protocol, now turn on hinges maintained by preservation staff and insurance requirements. The house receives thousands each week, yet no one belongs to it. Its marble floors carry a different rhythm. Where once there was procession, announced arrivals, managed introductions, choreographed circulation, there is now a steady drift. Guests move at their own pace, pausing beneath painted ceilings, photographing fireplaces, studying placards. The building remains visually intact, but its authority has been reassigned. It no longer directs behavior, it accommodates it. Climate systems hum discreetly behind walls built to resist salt air and Atlantic wind. Light is controlled to protect textiles that no longer serve their original purpose. Ropes demarcate thresholds that were once crossed only by invitation. The grand staircase, conceived as an instrument of ascent and display, now manages foot traffic. The transformation is not one of decay. The structure is immaculate. Stone is cleaned, gilding restored, tapestries stabilized. Yet the house's metabolism has changed. It no longer consumes capital in order to stage power. It consumes attention. In its original life, the building functioned as a private system calibrated for a narrow audience. Its architecture assumed hierarchy. Rooms were arranged to enforce gradation, public to semi-private, ceremonial to intimate. Service corridors ensured invisibility. The dining room was not simply a chamber for meals, it was a theater of precedence. The ceilings did not merely ornament space, they elevated those permitted beneath them. Today, interpretation panels explain these intentions. Docents translate rituals into anecdotes. The invisible labor that once sustained the house is summarized in a paragraph. What was once a closed circuit of wealth and command is now an open exhibit. The house has not lost its physical form, it has lost its exclusivity of function. Ownership has shifted from dynasty to institution. The authority that once radiated from a single family now disperses across boards, committees, and preservation guidelines. Financial pressure still exists, but it arrives in a different form: maintenance budgets, fundraising campaigns, donor events. The house must justify itself not to a patriarch, but to the public. In this state,
The Breakers survives through translation. Its past must be narrated to remain legible. Without explanation, its scale risks becoming aesthetic spectacle detached from purpose. The museum model stabilizes it, but also reframes it. The building no longer asserts dominance, it invites contemplation. This is the rupture. A residence engineered to embody private supremacy now depends on collective access. A structure designed to separate now gathers. The marble remains cold, the ceilings remain high, but the system that animated them has been replaced. Chapter 2. Why Newport Mattered. In the late 19th century, Newport functioned less as a town than as a stage. For most of the year, it was quiet. Its colonial streets, modest harbor, and Atlantic cliffs carried the memory of earlier mercantile wealth. But each summer, a different order arrived. Rail lines and steamships delivered families whose fortunes had been assembled in steel mills, rail corridors, coal fields, and financial houses. They did not come to retreat from industry. They came to reorganize it socially. Newport offered distance without exile, close enough to New York to remain relevant, yet removed enough to construct ritual. Here, industrial wealth underwent refinement. Business rivalries softened into invitations. Strategic alliances appeared as leisure. Dinners replaced boardrooms. The ocean air served as neutral ground. The colony, as it was called, operated according to codes that were neither written nor flexible. Admission required more than money. It required sponsorship, lineage by association, and the visible ability to sustain a household at scale. Newport became a testing mechanism. Those who could maintain presence season after season proved not only solvency, but permanence. Architecture became the language of that proof. Cottages, as they were politely termed, multiplied along Bellevue Avenue and the cliffs beyond. Their size contradicted the diminutive label. Each summer, facades grew more assertive. Stone replaced wood. Imported marble replaced local materials. Ballrooms expanded. The skyline along the ocean hardened into a competitive edge. The environment itself shaped the performance. Unlike urban mansions confined by neighboring walls, Newport estates stood exposed to view. Carriages traced predictable routes. Guests observed one another's arrivals and departures. Visibility was unavoidable. A house could not hide. Within this ecosystem, scale carried social meaning. To build modestly was to concede position. To build extravagantly without invitation was to risk exclusion. The balance required calibration. A residence had to assert authority without appearing desperate for it. Newport's hierarchy was seasonal but not superficial. It determined marriage alliances, philanthropic leadership, and reputational standing. Families who dominated its social calendar extended that influence into museums, universities, and corporate boards. The rituals enacted on its lawns echoed beyond the summer. This is why the setting mattered. The Breakers did not rise in isolation. It emerged within a competitive architecture of legitimacy. Every column, every terrace, every carved cornice participated in a silent dialogue with neighboring estates. The Atlantic wind that struck its facade also touched houses built by peers and rivals. Newport enforced comparison. Houses were read as statements. Their proportions were evaluated. Their interiors discussed. Invitations circulated in patterns that revealed rank. In such a place, understatement was not a strategy. Presence required magnitude. The town's earlier history as a colonial port lent gravity. Its churches and brick storefronts suggested continuity. Industrial magnates did not settle on an empty coast. They inserted themselves into an inherited landscape. The juxtaposition intensified the statement. New wealth positioned itself against old American memory. Newport became a ceremonial capital without legislation. No official decree granted it authority. The power derived from repetition. Each summer reinforced the pattern. Each season confirmed who belonged at the apex. Within this structure, a house was not merely shelter. It was an instrument calibrated to the expectations of an audience, trained to measure nuance.
Chapter 3: The Vanderbilt Intention. When the earlier breakers burned in 1892, the loss was immediate but not destabilizing. The site remained. The land still commanded the Atlantic edge. What vanished was a structure of wood and memory. What emerged in its place would reject vulnerability. Cornelius Vanderbilt II did not approach reconstruction as repair. He approached it as correction. The previous house had been substantial by any conventional measure, yet it had yielded to flame with unsettling speed. For a man whose fortune rested upon railroads, steel, and the disciplined movement of capital, such fragility carried symbolic weight. Wood suggested impermanence. Combustion implied exposure. The new house would not repeat that risk. The decision to rebuild in stone was practical, but it was also ideological. Industrial wealth in America was young. It faced scrutiny from established families who traced their authority to colonial landholdings or European ancestry. To endure socially, it required architecture that suggested inevitability. Stone communicated resistance. Marble implied lineage. The commission that followed was expansive in ambition and precise in intention. The house would not merely accommodate family life, it would absorb scrutiny. It would stand as material evidence that the Vanderbilt fortune was not a transient surge of railroad profit, but a foundation capable of shaping landscape and horizon. In Newport's competitive environment, hesitation could be misread. Rebuilding modestly would concede rank. Rebuilding extravagantly without discipline would invite criticism. The solution lay in scale married to structure. Cornelius Vanderbilt II operated within systems, corporate boards, transportation networks, financial syndicates. He understood coordination. The house would be assembled through similar orchestration. Architects, engineers, craftsmen, and suppliers would be aligned toward a unified result. Capital would direct labor with the same efficiency that rail schedules directed trains. The site itself reinforced intention. Positioned along the cliffs, exposed to salt air and storm, the land demanded fortification. The Atlantic did not negotiate. Foundations would need to anchor into bedrock. Walls would need density. The structure would declare resistance not only to social comparison, but to elemental force. There was also a question of inheritance. A house of this magnitude signaled continuity beyond a single lifetime. It prepared space for succession, for ritual repetition, for the reinforcement of family narrative. Rooms were not simply designed for present comfort, but for recurring ceremony. The dining hall anticipated generations of guests who would read the setting as confirmation of stability. Industrial wealth often manifested through factories and infrastructure, sites of production rarely associated with elegance. By contrast, the breakers would separate origin from display. The noise of rail yards would not penetrate its salons. Wealth would appear distilled, refined, inevitable.
The commission therefore functioned as translation. It converted industrial capital into architectural authority. It reframed profit as permanence. Within this intention lay discipline. Budgets were vast but not chaotic. Materials were selected for durability as much as effect. Fireproofing became principle, not accessory. The new breakers would be engineered to resist the fate of its predecessor. The decision to rebuild on such a scale was not impulsive response to loss. It was a strategic assertion. The site would not remain empty. It would return amplified. Chapter 4: Designing Permanence. To transform intention into stone required mediation. Richard Morris Hunt did not simply draw facades, he interpreted ambition. Trained at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, he carried with him a system of proportion, hierarchy, and structural logic derived from European precedent. For a client seeking architectural legitimacy, this lineage was not incidental. It provided grammar. The commission demanded more than ornament. It required coherence. Hunt approached the site at the breakers as a problem of mass and exposure. The Atlantic winds would press against its walls. Salt air would erode detail. The house would be read from multiple vantage points: approach, garden, cliff, sea. It needed to command each perspective without appearing unstable. The design drew upon Italian Renaissance palazzi, particularly the urban palaces of Genoa and Turin. Their rusticated bases, ordered facades, and interior courtyards conveyed control. Yet those precedents were conceived for dense cities, hemmed in by narrow streets. Newport offered openness. Hunt adapted the language to landscape. The central mass expanded, windows widened, lodges opened toward the ocean. This was not imitation, it was translation across context. Structural innovation underpinned aesthetic reference. Steel framing concealed within masonry provided rigidity and fire resistance. Floors were reinforced, walls thickened. The skeleton of the building carried weight more reliably than the timber structures it replaced. Yet the steel was hidden. What presented outwardly was carved stone and marble. Modern engineering supported historical appearance. Coordination became essential. Drawings traveled across the Atlantic. Marble was quarried in Italy. Decorative elements were fabricated in European workshops, then shipped in crates to Rhode Island. Each component required precise measurement before departure. Once in place, adjustment would be costly and visible. Artisans operated within a distributed network. Sculptors carved capitals and friezes in studios far from the site. Metalworkers cast balustrades. Mosaicists prepared intricate flooring panels. The house began to exist in fragments, columns in one country, staircases in another, long before they converged. Hunt's office functioned as a central node. Drawings circulated, revisions were issued, specifications detailed not only dimensions but surface treatment, joint alignment, tolerances. Without modern machinery to compensate for error, precision at origin became imperative. Stone could not be forced into misaligned space without consequence. The design process unfolded as choreography between tradition and adaptation. Ceiling heights were exaggerated beyond European norms to accommodate American expectations of grandeur. Circulation patterns were adjusted to support the scale of entertaining anticipated in Newport. Service routes were embedded within walls to maintain visual order above. Light was considered a structure. Large windows admitted ocean brightness into halls conceived for evening display. Artificial illumination, powered by electricity, integrated discreetly into cornices and chandeliers. The house would not rely solely on candles or gaslight. It would align with contemporary infrastructure while preserving classical form. Permanence required foresight. Materials were selected for resistance to fire, moisture, and time. The lessons of the previous destruction were absorbed into specification. Iron beams replaced timber supports. Masonry walls created compartments designed to slow potential catastrophe. Through this process, architecture ceased to be decorative envelope. It became argument rendered in dimension and weight.
Chapter 6. The Machine Beneath the Marble. When construction ended, another system began. At the breakers, architecture did not conclude with stone and ornament. It transitioned into operation. The visible grandeur above ground depended upon a concealed network below and behind it. Corridors, stairwells, boiler rooms, storage vaults, and service quarters, arranged with the same deliberation as the Great Hall. The house was designed to function as a closed organism. Heat, light, food, water, and waste were managed internally through coordinated channels. Coal deliveries arrived discreetly and were directed toward furnaces positioned away from ceremonial spaces. Boilers generated warmth that circulated through pipes embedded in walls and floors. Grates and vents were placed to maintain comfort without revealing mechanism. Electricity, still a developing utility, threaded through conduits hidden within masonry. Switches were positioned for efficiency rather than display. Illumination could be increased for evening gatherings or reduced to conserve power when rooms stood empty. The system required monitoring. Engineers and maintenance staff occupied roles that were technical rather than domestic, yet they operated within the same hierarchy. Water entered the house through pumps and storage tanks designed to ensure steady pressure across multiple floors. Bathrooms, then considered luxuries, depended on plumbing that demanded vigilance. A leak could damage plaster ceilings or imported textiles. Inspection became routine. Below the main staircase ran parallel routes reserved for staff. Narrower passages allowed movement without crossing the sight lines of guests. The architecture enforced invisibility. A tray could travel from kitchen to dining room without exposing the labor behind it. Bells installed in principal rooms rang in a centralized location, summoning servants through coded signals. Each chime corresponded to a space and an expectation. The kitchen complex operated as industrial workshop. Ovens, preparation tables, pantries, and sculleries were arranged for volume. Entertaining at this scale required repetition, multiple courses, synchronized service, exact timing. Deliveries from markets were received and cataloged. Ice was stored and rationed. Silver was polished and inventoried. Staff lived within the house during the season. Bedrooms and shared quarters occupied upper floors and attic spaces, separated from guest rooms yet integrated into the structure. The hierarchy extended spatially. Senior servants enjoyed marginally larger accommodations. Junior staff slept closer together. Schedules governed daily life. Morning cleaning preceded breakfast service. Fires were tended before occupants descended. Floors were swept, carpets brushed, curtains adjusted to regulate light. Nothing appeared spontaneous. Even leisure required preparation. Money sustained this rhythm. Wages were paid not only for labor but for discretion. Retention ensured continuity. Experienced staff understood the choreography and executed it without visible strain. Replacement carried risk, errors in timing, breaches of etiquette, inefficiencies that could disrupt the illusion of effortless hospitality. The house did not rest when unoccupied. Maintenance continued in reduced form.
Systems were inspected, textiles aired, silver secured. The machine beneath the marble remained alert, preserving readiness for the next arrival. Through this hidden infrastructure, architecture became performance. The visible calm of salons and galleries depended on disciplined movement below.
Chapter 7. The Apex of Display. When the house was fully operational, it entered its intended condition: activation. During the summer season in Newport, the breakers did not function as retreat, it functioned as instrument. Its rooms, proportioned for ceremony, assumed their roles with precision. The Great Hall received arrivals not as casual guests, but as participants in a hierarchy already understood. Carriages approached along prescribed routes. Footmen calculated timing. Doors opened at moments that preserved symmetry. The architecture shaped movement from the first step inside. Visitors ascended the marble staircase not simply to reach upper floors, but to be seen doing so. Elevation signified position. Evening gatherings began before the first course was served. Drawing rooms absorbed conversation, arranged in clusters determined by rank and familiarity. Seating was not arbitrary. Placement conveyed alignment. Hosts navigated these patterns with deliberate awareness, reinforcing alliances while avoiding visible exclusion. The dining room, illuminated by electric light refracted through crystal and gilt, operated as central chamber of display. Tables extended to accommodate numbers that communicated scale. Service unfolded in measured sequence. Courses arrived in coordination with conversation, neither rushed nor delayed. Silver reflected candlelight and social proximity. Music, when present, remained secondary to observation. Performances provided atmosphere but did not dominate attention. The true spectacle lay in composition, the alignment of wealth, attire, lineage, and influence within a single frame. Dress codes reinforced the architecture's intent. Formal attire mirrored the structure's rigidity. Silk and tailored wool moved against marble and mosaic. Jewelry caught light from chandeliers positioned to amplify effect. The house did not overpower its occupants, it magnified them. Visibility extended beyond interiors. Afternoon promenades along the lawn or terrace allowed discreet assessment among peers. The Atlantic formed backdrop, yet the horizon mattered less than the presence of neighboring estates across the landscape. Invitations circulated carefully. Absence could be interpreted. The breakers thus operated as filter. Attendance signaled admission into a controlled circle. Those invited were acknowledged. Those omitted understood the implication. Industrial capital, once measured in tonnage and mileage, translated here into social confirmation. Season after season, repetition solidified pattern. Families returned to established rooms. Servants resumed familiar routines. Guests anticipated familiar rituals. The house gained authority not through novelty, but through continuity. Its scale justified itself through use. The ballroom did not appear excessive when filled. The dining hall did not seem oversized when every seat carried significance. Architecture and social choreography aligned. Within these gatherings, the distinction between new wealth and inherited status blurred. The setting naturalized industrial fortunes, framing them within Renaissance proportions and European references. Steel and rail profits dissolved into marble and fresco. The house achieved equilibrium between structure and ceremony. It performed the argument embedded in its walls.
Chapter 9. Extraction and Transition. Pressure, when sustained, alters behavior. At the breakers, the shift did not announce itself through abandonment. It began through recalculation. Rooms that had once required full seasonal staffing were closed selectively. Wings were consolidated. Maintenance schedules tightened. The house remained inhabited, but its operational perimeter narrowed. Capital, once directed toward expansion and embellishment, redirected towards stabilization. Decorative renewal slowed. Replacement became repair. Inventories were reassessed not for acquisition, but for potential divestment. Objects that had reinforced the architecture's authority were reconsidered as assets with market value. Extraction entered quietly. Silver services, artworks, furnishings, items once integrated into ritual acquired secondary identities as commodities. Auction houses provided pathways from private collection to dispersed ownership. The house's interior, designed as cohesive environment, experienced incremental subtraction. Stewardship had originally implied growth and continuity. Now it implied negotiation. Insurance costs rose. Property taxes persisted. The mechanical systems embedded within walls aged. Boilers required modernization. Electrical wiring, once advanced, demanded compliance with evolving codes. Each intervention carried expense disproportionate to daily use. The house's scale resisted partial occupation. Heating only select rooms created imbalance. Closing entire floors introduced risks of dampness and deterioration. A palace built for full activation did not easily accommodate restraint. Labor structures transformed as well. The resident staff model became impractical. Positions consolidated. External contractors replaced permanent employees. Knowledge once passed internally, from head housekeeper to junior maid, from chief engineer to apprentice, fragmented. Ownership ideology confronted arithmetic. The estate no longer guaranteed social leverage commensurate with its cost. Public perception shifted further toward critique of conspicuous inheritance. Maintaining visible opulence risked misalignment with contemporary expectations of discretion. Adaptation required structural reconsideration. Could the house generate revenue without eroding its identity? Could access be expanded without dissolving hierarchy entirely? The prospect of opening selected areas to visitors emerged not as celebration, but as necessity. Transition from private domain to semi-public space required administrative framework. Legal instruments redefined control. Governance extended beyond family deliberation to institutional partnership. Preservation standards introduced oversight external to lineage. The house began to reorient from instrument of dominance to subject of conservation. Its value recalibrated from social leverage to cultural artifact. Yet this reclassification carried paradox. To preserve, one must expose. To stabilize finances, one must invite entry. Extraction and adaptation proceeded in tandem. The architecture remained intact, but its internal economy reconfigured around survival rather than assertion.
Chapter 10. What the Walls Still Prove. In its current state, the breakers no longer commands obedience, it commands interpretation. The house stands intact against the Atlantic, its facade unchanged in proportion or material. Columns continue to bear weight. Cornices remain sharply cut. The Great Hall still rises with theatrical height. Yet the authority once embedded in these elements has shifted from social enforcement to historical testimony. What the walls now offer is evidence. They testify to coordination at a scale rarely attempted in the United States at the end of the 19th century. Before diesel cranes and hydraulic platforms, before prefabricated panels and digital modeling,
a private residence of extraordinary mass was assembled through distributed labor and disciplined oversight. The building records that effort in every joint and seam. Its foundations confirm calculation rather than improvisation. Bedrock anchoring speaks to foresight. The concealed steel framework signals a willingness to merge innovation with tradition. Marble imported across oceans and fitted without mechanized assistance demonstrates the reach of capital translated into logistics. The house proves that industrial wealth, often associated with speed and expansion, could slow itself into permanence. Railroads and shipping lines generated motion. Here, that motion resolved into stillness. Profit hardened into stone. The visible opulence does not simply reflect taste, it reflects confidence in continuity. To commission ceilings painted in European workshops, to embed mosaic floors assembled abroad, to coordinate artisans separated by language and geography, these acts required belief in future return. The investment assumed seasons yet to unfold. Even in museum quiet, the architecture communicates that original conviction. The scale of the dining room presumes gathering. The height of the staircase anticipates ascent. Proportions remain calibrated for ceremony, whether or not ceremony occurs. What survives most clearly is the system of intention. The building was conceived as argument that American industry could generate structures equal in refinement to those of established European aristocracies. It was designed to normalize newly acquired fortunes by embedding them within familiar architectural grammar. Today, detached from its initial function, the house reveals that argument more plainly. Without the distraction of active ritual, the materials speak of coordination and resolve. The stone does not announce lineage, it displays construction. The breakers endures not as private fortress, but as structural record of an ideology that equated scale with legitimacy. Its endurance demonstrates that wealth, when organized with discipline, could mobilize global networks of supply and craft long before modern machinery simplified such ambition. The building no longer needs to persuade contemporaries. It persists as proof of what was once considered necessary.